Have you ever looked at your life and wondered when exactly it stopped feeling like yours? That thought hit me one ordinary Thursday morning as I stared at my reflection. Same face, same tired eyes, same mechanical smile I'd worn for years. From the outside, everything about my life looked perfectly intact. A stable marriage, 2 healthy kids, a decent house in the suburbs of Seattle. But inside, something was quietly eroding. A slow, silent unraveling that no one else seemed to notice. My name is Rachel Porter, and I used to think I knew who I was. A devoted wife, a caring mother, a dependable colleague. I believed that if I followed the rules, life would unfold neatly, predictably. But somewhere between work deadlines, packed lunches, and PTA meetings, I became invisible in my own story. I couldn't remember the last time I felt seen, wanted, or truly alive. My husband, Ethan, was a good man, steady, loyal, endlessly practical. The kind of man who fixed leaky faucets before they dripped and paid the bills before they were due. We'd been married 12 years, and though the love between us had once burned bright, now it glowed like the last ember of a fire long forgotten. We didn't fight often. We didn't talk much either. We simply coexisted, orbiting each other like planets caught in routine gravity. It wasn't unhappiness that gnawed at me. It was emptiness. Some nights I'd lie awake beside Ethan, listening to the rhythm of his breathing and wondering if he ever felt it, too. That quiet ache of being together yet utterly alone. I never asked. Maybe I didn't want to know the answer. Then came Lucas Grant, a freelance designer hired to work with my marketing team. From the moment we met, something in the air shifted. He had this unhurried confidence, a warmth that drew people in without trying. His laughter came easily, and his eyes, blue, gray, and steady, had a way of making you feel like you were the only person in the room. At first, I told myself it was nothing, just harmless conversation, just someone new. But deep down, I recognized the flicker of danger, the quiet hum of curiosity waking after years of dormancy. One afternoon after a long meeting, he looked at me and said, "You always hold everything together, don't you?" The words lingered longer than they should have. Because in that moment, I realized how desperately I wanted someone to see what holding everything together was costing me. And that was how it began. The smallest spark in a life I thought had no fire left. Lucas wasn't supposed to matter. He was just another name in a crowded inbox, another professional face across the conference table. Yet somehow he began to slip through the cracks of my carefully contained life. He asked questions no one else did about the kind of music I liked, the books that made me cry, the places I dreamed of visiting but never had time for. It was startling, that feeling of being noticed. Not for the roles I filled, wife, mother, employee, but simply for being Rachel. At first, I resisted it. I kept our conversations brief, polite, tucked neatly within the boundaries of professionalism. But boundaries are fragile things when attention feels like oxygen. Every time we talked, something in me softened. He had this effortless way of listening, of making silence feel safe instead of awkward. Ethan, meanwhile, drifted further into his routines. He came home tired, eyes glazed from work, phone buzzing with unread messages. We still shared a bed, but not a connection. Our conversations had become transactional, updates about the kids, grocery lists, small talk about the weather. Sometimes I would look at him and wonder when we had stopped being partners and started being co-managers of the same predictable life. One evening after the kids had gone to bed, I tried to bridge the gap. "You ever feel like we're just existing?" I asked. Ethan looked up from his laptop, brow furrowed. "What do you mean?" "I don't know," I said, forcing a laugh. "Just tired, I guess." He smiled faintly. "We're all tired, Rach. It's just life." Then he kissed my forehead and went back to his screen. That was the night I realized how loneliness can bloom even in a marriage that looks perfectly intact. The next morning at work, Lucas stopped by my desk, coffee in hand. "You look like you could use this," he said, his smile small but genuine. I wanted to tell him not to be so kind. That kindness in moments of weakness can feel like temptation. But I just smiled back and said, "You have no idea." It wasn't flirtation. Not yet. It was recognition. 2 people quietly acknowledging the weight of their own exhaustion. Still, something inside me shifted. I began to check the clock, waiting for the next meeting, the next message, the next accidental brush of conversation that made my day feel less gray. I told myself it was harmless. Everyone craves connection. Everyone wants to be seen. But deep down, I already knew better. Because once you start depending on someone else to feel alive, you've already begun to step away from the life you built. And somewhere I think I had already taken my first step. It started small. The kind of small that pretends to be harmless. A shared joke during a long meeting, a text sent too late at night, a moment of laughter that lingered a little too long. Each instance felt insignificant on its own, but together they began weaving a quiet thread between us, one I pretended not to notice tightening. Lucas had a way of making ordinary moments feel charged. When he spoke, he looked directly at me, as if he could hear the thoughts I didn't dare say aloud. Around him, I felt lighter, freer, like I'd stepped out of the grayscale of my daily life and into something vividly alive. One afternoon, we stayed late, finalizing a presentation. The office was nearly empty, the hum of the air conditioner the only sound between us. He leaned over my shoulder, close enough that I could feel the warmth of his breath as he pointed to the screen. My pulse stuttered. For a moment, neither of us moved. Then he stepped back abruptly, clearing his throat. "Sorry," he said quietly. "Didn't mean to." "It's okay," I interrupted, though my voice trembled. That was the moment I realized how dangerous closeness can feel when you've been starved of it. After that, avoidance became impossible. The more I tried to keep my distance, the more his presence filled the spaces I couldn't control. My thoughts, my mornings, even the silence of my marriage. I began dressing with more care, telling myself it was for me, but I knew who I hoped would notice. Ethan did notice, but not in the way I wanted. "You've been distracted lately," he said one night as we sat at the dinner table. "Is something going on at work?" I smiled too quickly. "Just a big project. You know how it gets." He nodded, accepting the explanation without question, and something about his easy trust made the guilt ache sharper. A week later, after a particularly long day, Lucas offered me a ride home. The rain was relentless, streaking across the windshield in glistening trails. The car smelled faintly of cedar and coffee. We talked about work, about dreams, about how strange it feels when life becomes predictable. When he pulled up outside my house, I didn't move to open the door. We sat there in silence, rain tapping softly against the windows. He turned to me and said, barely above a whisper, "You don't have to keep pretending you're okay." My throat tightened. For a second, I forgot how to breathe. I could have left then, walked away, gone inside, locked the door behind me, but I didn't. Instead, I turned to face him. And that single decision, small, human, impulsive, was the one that changed everything. The moment our lips met, the world tilted. It wasn't fireworks or music swelling in the background, just a quiet collapse of everything I thought I controlled. The kiss was soft, hesitant, almost accidental. Yet, it felt like stepping over a line I could never uncross. When I pulled away, my heart was pounding so hard I could hear it in my ears. "We can't," I whispered, though even I wasn't sure if it was a plea or a lie. "I know," Lucas murmured. But his eyes said something entirely different. That night, I couldn't sleep. I lay beside Ethan, the ghost of that kiss haunting me, guilt tightening like a vice around my chest. Every part of me screamed that I'd done something unforgivable. Yet beneath the shame was a pulse of something else. Aliveness, terrifying and intoxicating. Days blurred into weeks. I tried to act normal, to bury what had happened beneath layers of routine, but nothing felt normal anymore. The air between Lucas and me had changed. We didn't speak of it, yet every glance, every shared silence carried the weight of what we weren't saying. One evening, while finalizing another project, he broke the silence. "Do you ever wish things were different?" he asked. I hesitated. Different how? Like if we'd met someone at a different time in a different life? I should have stopped him. I should have reminded us both that this wasn't that kind of story. But the truth slipped out before I could stop it. All the time. He smiled sadly, like he'd been waiting to hear it. That's what I thought. For a moment, the world felt still. But stillness has its own kind of danger. It leaves room for reality to catch up. A week later, Ethan found the messages. It happened so simply. I'd left my phone charging in the kitchen. He'd picked it up to check the time. I came in just as he scrolled through the thread. The texts that started as jokes and turned into confessions, the late-night exchanges that had crossed into forbidden territory. His face drained of color. "Rachel, what is this?" There was no use pretending. The truth had already spoken for me. "I'm sorry," I said, the words breaking apart as they left my lips. "Was it him?" he asked quietly. I nodded. For a long moment, he said nothing. The silence stretched until it felt unbearable. Then, with a voice barely above a whisper, he asked why. I wanted to explain, to tell him about the loneliness, the numbness, the way I'd started to disappear inside our perfect little life. But all that came out was the truth stripped bare, because I didn't know how to feel alive anymore. He stared at me, eyes glassy, then turned and walked out of the room. And in that instant, I understood. Sometimes the thing that wakes you up is also the thing that breaks you completely. It's been almost a year since that night, the night everything fell apart. Ethan moved out the following week, taking only a suitcase and a silence. The house felt cavernous without him, as if every room echoed with what we'd left unsaid. The kids adjusted faster than I did. Children have a way of accepting change as fact. I, on the other hand, woke each morning to a hollow ache that reminded me actions, once taken, can't be undone. Lucas tried to reach out at first, texts, emails, apologies written between the lines, but I couldn't face him. What had once felt like oxygen now felt suffocating. Whatever connection we shared had been burned clean by guilt. Eventually, his messages stopped. Maybe he finally understood what I'd known all along. What we had wasn't love, only the illusion of escape. I started therapy a few months later. At first, I sat through the sessions like an observer in my own story, answering questions mechanically. But gradually, the layers began to peel back. My therapist asked me something that stayed with me. When did you stop showing up for yourself? I didn't have an answer then. Maybe it was the day I stopped writing. Or the years I spent shrinking my needs so that everyone else could breathe easier. Maybe it was the quiet surrender of thinking that being a good wife and mother meant erasing the parts of me that still wanted. Ethan and I talk now, cautiously, like two people learning a new language. We meet once a week for family dinners, careful not to step on the fractures still healing between us. Sometimes when he looks at me across the table, I see a flicker of the man I married, the one who once made me laugh until my sides hurt. But I don't mistake that flicker for a promise. Some things can be mended, but not everything returns to what it was. I've learned that infidelity isn't just about desire. It's about absence. The absence of attention, of emotional safety, of self-recognition. You don't wake up one day and decide to destroy your life. It happens quietly, one unmet need at a time. Now, I live slower. I take walks without rushing somewhere. I read again. I write, even when it hurts. There's a strange kind of peace in rebuilding yourself from the ruins of your own choices. Sometimes late at night, I catch myself wondering if Ethan will ever fully forgive me or if I'll ever fully forgive myself. Maybe forgiveness isn't a finish line. Maybe it's just the decision to keep walking forward, even with the weight of what you've done. Trying something new did change my life, but not in the way I expected. It didn't give me freedom. It gave me truth. And truth, I've learned, is both the heaviest burden and the lightest thing to finally carry.